Jana Karskiego poznałem w okupowanej Warszawie, w moim mieszkaniu na Żoliborzu. Ja byłem sam, otworzyłem mu drzwi i odbyłem z nim rozmowę. Ten człowiek, którego imienia i nazwiska nie znałem, w ciągu następnych 2 miesięcy wyjechał do Londynu i zabrał ze sobą wiedzę o okupacji i dokumentację tych potwornych zbrodni infernalnych, których dopuszcza się okupant niemiecki.
Jan Karski's mission was to give a first-hand account of the horrors of the Nazi occupation of Poland and the mass murder of Polish Jewry.
There are some 2 Jewish underground organizations. They want also to pass their messages. So will you do it? I said, naturally.
Karski was part of a very clandestine movement. He was working for the underground, for the Polish underground, for British underground, and he was very strictly incognito.
He wasn't Jewish, he wasn't any part of the Jewish world. He chose to be on the other side.
The initiative came from the Bund leader, Feiner. He told me, Witold, this was my pseudonym. I know the English. I visited England. When you describe them, what is happening to the Jews, they will not believe you probably. What would help our cause if you, with your own eyes, see the situation in the Warsaw Ghetto? My role, as they told me, was just to walk and observe and remember and repeat in London. Well, I saw horrible things. I remember degradation, starvation, and death.
There's no doubt that as an eyewitness to the things that he saw, he very much took it to his heart and he was deeply affected by it. And you might even say that he was actually haunted by it. And he was probably haunted by it till the end of his days.
I saw some woman with a baby. Dead bodies lying on the street. We were walking the streets. My guide, from time to time, look at it, remember. For this he took me to the ghetto, remember. And I did remember. As soon as I left, I started to vomit. I vomited with blood. Never again in my life I saw this kind of a scene.
Karski wyjeżdżał z pełnym poczuciu tej misji, co wiezie w głowie, w sercu i w materiałach.
The British and Americans, the British Foreign Office and the American State Department, took a different view of the information which Karski had presented to them, of the information generally about what we now call the Holocaust.
I met all key men in the Allied camp except Churchill. I tried to tell them 2 basic things: the situation in the Polish underground and then Jewish messages, what the Jews did expect or asked the Allies in order to help.
Karski was on his way to Washington with a very special mission to inform the U.S. government and hopefully President Roosevelt personally of what was going on in Poland.
The news about the Holocaust and about the fact that Jews are killed by gas and concentration camps was on the 16th page of the New York Times at the time, because the New York Times was afraid that they'll dramatize too much the issue of Jews. They will be accused of trying to bring the United States into war.
On the front page of the New York Times that day, there was a photograph of Herbert Lehman, who was the governor of New York State, and he had donated his sneakers to the scrap rubber drive. In other words, that's the main story. And this is on a day in which the New York Times carries a report that a million Jews have been murdered.
So, a lord of humanity. Roosevelt, unbelievably, he projected power, majesty.
Roosevelt was very conscious of Nazi propaganda against him. He did not want to in any way strengthen the canard that America was dragged into the war by the Jews, and this was a Jewish war. And consequently, he didn't want to do anything specifically that could be interpreted as being done on behalf of the Jewish people. And listen, if you're not willing to do anything on behalf of the Jewish people, that's a big problem during World War II, when Jews are being mass murdered in Europe.
Po rozmowie z Rooseveltem zrozumiał, że nikt nie pomoże Żydom podczas wojny, że dopiero po wojnie się porachują z Niemcami.
You will tell your leaders that we shall win this war. The guilty ones will be punished for their crimes. Justice, freedom shall prevail.
He then took a vow of silence. He said, I had this message. The world heard what I had to say and didn't, about the greatest crime in history, and did nothing.
He literally thought he was a failure. He mentioned that. And as I say, he told me that his silence was related to the fact that he didn't think he should speak about it because he hadn't done enough.
Panie Władysławie, to przynajmniej jakiś konkretnych, żywych ludzi ratował. Niektórych pan uratował, a ja chciałem uratować miliony, ale nie mogłem uratować nikogo.
Nothing important happened as a result of my mission. It didn't do any good.
He believed at that time that his mission had been a total failure, and that those to whom he told his story had not listened and had disbelieved it. And I was able to show him that in this very short period of 22 days, the report that he brought, which is quite long and difficult to read and very disturbing, transformed Allied policy from one of skepticism to one of belief, and to one of relative silence to one of very loud speaking and protesting.
Karski's testimony, Karski's trip, his meetings were part of this process that helped ultimately convince the leadership that something had to be done.
He presented his report in London on the 25th of November 1942, and a mere 22 days later, that is only 3 weeks later, Moscow, London and Washington announced publicly in an extraordinary declaration, unique in the history of the Second World War, that the Nazis were deliberately seeking and already in the process of exterminating the Jews of Europe, and that these bestial crimes were true, were taking place, and were condemned.
Jan Karski's contribution was to show us what courage, what determination, what pain and resistance to what was going on in the world was all about.
He was a man of 100% pure moral character.
To był jeden z najszlachetniejszych ludzi na świecie, których ja znałem.
Jan Karski is a hero, and that's clear to me. In other words, he's a hero of the Holocaust. He's one of the few people who risked his life, in a sense, to get the word out.
Students often ask me, give me an example of a hero. Give me an example of a modern day prophet. And I would answer and say Jan Karski.
Karski himself was, not without fear. He wasn't a fearless person. Nobody is fearless in war. But somehow to encourage young people that if you find yourself in a circumstance, whatever it is, where you can do something to make a difference, let Karski's story be one of those that inspires you to try.